Hey gang, so here it is. Right here I figured out what this trip cost me. And man, I tell you, after going through it, I realized that, you know, if I had just taken my camping gear along with me, if I had just bothered to set it up and put it down every night for 51 days, if I had just slept on a sleeping pad that's about this thick, and if I had dealt with the bugs and with the rain, and if I had gone and lived off of top ramen and tuna for those 51 days, I could have saved myself a whole lot of money. Nah, just kidding. I'm not interested in traveling like that anymore. Personally, I want a little bit more cushy lifestyle when I'm out there on the road, right? I want to create the trip that I am going to enjoy. And for me, on this Alaska trip, that was to stay in hotels, and that was to allow myself to find good food and enjoy it along the way. And look, I think that everybody should travel in the way that they enjoy. Right? If you enjoy camping, if you enjoy cooking for yourself, then by all means go out and do it. Right? I encourage everybody to, again, ride in the way that you enjoy. But if you're just going out there to save money alone, well, then I just don't think that's the right way to go. But again, it's completely up to you. Now, when I started planning this trip, I was hoping to keep my budget around $10,000. Right? But I also knew that realistically, with the way gas prices were, with the way that hotel costs were, and also adding maintenance for the motorcycle in there, I was probably looking at somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000. Right? And that's right where this actually came out at. Right? When I added everything up, my total costs for this trip were $12,268.11. Now, breaking that down for you, right, my fuel costs were $1,112.66. My hotel costs, which was the single biggest item by far, $7,460.29. Yes, I know I could have saved money if I would have camped. I don't want to camp. Now, my food costs came out to $2,183.04. Now, I spent some money for food using my credit card, but most of it I paid for in cash. I had $2,000 in cash when I started this trip. $750 of it I went down and I exchanged for Canadian currency, so I got $905 in Canadian money. That left me with about $1,250 that I took in U.S. cash. I came home with $200 in U.S. cash, so I spent $1,050 again in U.S. currency. Now, for maintenance on the motorcycle, I went and I had the service done in Spokane, which included tires, right, and that cost me $1,044. Then I went to a car wash for like $8 or $9, so my total expenditure for maintenance on the bike was $1,052.99. Now, the only other expenditure that I have was some foreign transaction fees, which amounted to just under $107. Now, as I said, the total expenditures on the trip was $12,268.11. So an average per day cost was $235.93. Average fuel cost per day was $21.40, and average hotels, which I thought was actually pretty decent, was $143.47. And average food costs came out to $41.98 per day, again, which I thought was pretty good. I usually try to stay around that $50 a day mark. Now, I'm not going to go through every single day of this trip and give you costs for hotels and so forth, but let me give you a few of them that I really enjoyed staying at. Right, probably my favorite place as far as the room goes, and then having some great food there, was to stay at the Belle 2 Lodge, and that was right around $200 for the stay. So again, that was a really nice, relaxing place to stay. They have a buffet for breakfast that was really good, and they have a little restaurant there where, again, I got a pretty good meal for not that much money. Another place that I really enjoyed was the Blue Bay Motel, and that was in Tobermory. And that was really cool because not only was the room really nice, but then I could walk around the tub there and go to all the shops and, again, get some food. So, and that actually wasn't that expensive. US costs were $119.11. And then another place that I really liked was one that was kind of interesting. When you see the videos, I'll show it to you and I'll talk about it a little bit. But it was the Rolling Rapids Motel in Whitney, Ontario. And that was $200 or so Canadian, but in US money, that was about $157. So it was a little rustic, but again, I really had a good time there. It's got a nice, peaceful setting right by the river. So still another place that I enjoyed was the Destination Inn in Radium Hot Springs. Again, about a $200 a night Canadian. So for me, that was about $150, $160 a night. Still another nice place was the Inn on the Harbor, and that was in Prince Rupert. Again, when I took an adventure cruise there. And that was, well, I stayed there for 2 nights, so the total was $301.68. So about $150 a night. And the last place that I'm going to mention is a little bed and breakfast. It's called the Hideaway Bed and Breakfast, and that's in Tok, Alaska. I stayed there twice. Right, one night was $150, and the next night on the way back, because it was the weekend, was $185. But again, very nice, clean, relaxing, and you get a great breakfast in the morning, and the hostess was really sweet. Now, one other place I'm going to mention, not because it was the most luxurious, but I really liked the location of it. I stayed at the Liard Inn, right across from the Liard Hot Springs Park, and this was great. Again, because of that location, the rooms were nice, they were clean, right, and they had a restaurant downstairs that was pretty darn good. There's also gas there at the inn, so it's one-stop shopping for everything. Now, there are campgrounds right there at the lodge, as well as, of course, in the park across the street. But if you don't want to camp, then the inn is a good place to stay, but book ahead of time because they have a limited number of rooms and they were filled up when I was there. All right, let's talk about fuel costs on this trip. Most of the time I was paying in the high threes, $3.80, $3.90, something like that, a gallon here in the United States. A few times it went up into the fours, $4.30 or so a gallon, but that's about as high as I saw. In Canada, of course, gas is more expensive. It's more highly taxed there, and it's priced per liter. So the cheapest that I found per liter was $1.79, at least that I can recall, and the highest price I saw was about $2.29 a liter. So multiply that by 4, and that'll give you your cost of gas per gallon. I also found food to be rather expensive on this trip, especially as you go up into Canada, into the more remote areas, and I know it's going to cost them more to get food in and so forth, but again, prices were up there. It would cost me probably an average of 30 to 35 Canadian dollars per meal. I mean, even for a lunch and for a dinner, it was all about the same price. So again, I thought that was said pretty expensive. Getting back into the U.S. is when I saw my cheaper food prices. The lowest price I found was I got a great kind of brunch going through Ohio at this little diner in, I think it was Friendly, Ohio. And the meal cost me like $9, right? But it was great. It was awesome. So I told them, I said, man, you got the best prices I've seen on this trip. And of course I gave the waitress an extra tip for that. And that's one thing that I try to remember when I'm traveling is that, these people are trying to make a living. They're, serving me. They're making great food. So I'm pretty generous with my tips. Again, that was all part of that cash that I spent, on this trip. Again, because I basically try to to spread the wealth around a little bit, right? These people are, as I said, out there trying to make a living, and I want them to be there for me, so I'm going to, again, tip them and make it worth their while. So before I go, I always feel like I have to say this, right? Because I get people who comment, right, on the videos. I am not rich, right? What my wife and I have done is we planned for being able to do this over the course of our working years, right? We bought a house that was reasonably priced. It's small, and we don't need a big one, and we've stayed here for, 24 years in the same home now. Right, so doing that, driving cars for long periods of time, right? My wife's car we've had since 2007, right? And I've got a new truck out there now because we knew we would need one new vehicle as we went into retirement. So that one's going to last probably 15 or 20 years. It'll probably be the last truck I buy, right, during my lifetime. So again, we've planned how to do this stuff, over the course of our lifetime, and that's how I can afford to do these things. Now, of course, having this YouTube channel does also help. I make a little bit of money, again, not a whole lot, but I do have to declare it on my income taxes. So this enables me to also take all of the expenses for making the videos, that is, all my travel expenses, and use them as deductions. Now, another thing that I do, and again, I've talked about this before, but is I belong to several of these hotel chains rewards programs. I belong to the Choice Hotels, the Marriott line, and then also the Holiday Inn line of hotels. And my number one that I use is the Best Westerns, right? I'm a Diamond Rewards member because I stayed there so many times, so I get extra points every time that I stay at these hotels. So like when I came back into the US this time, I pretty much stayed almost exclusively at the Best Western hotels, except for one night I was in a Holiday Inn. So what I can do then is use the reward points that I have. If I have enough to get a free night, I can do that, or I can use them to reduce the nightly rate as I go along. And that's what I did primarily on this trip because I didn't have enough for one single free room. So again, I knocked that rate down by 20, 30 bucks a night, for all of the hotels that I use, again, coming back home. So again, that does help. And then next time, now I'm going to have a bunch of points, right, because of all the hotels that I used at the end of this trip. All right, gang, so I think that's it. You can ask me questions if you want, and I'm sure some people will yell at me and tell me how much of a fool I am for spending all this money. But again, as far as I'm concerned, the amount of money that you spend is irrelevant, right? You want to go out, or I want to go out anyway, and I want to have the ride and the experience that I enjoy, right? And it costs what it costs, right? If I am willing to have a lesser experience, well, okay, I can save myself some money. But again, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have that much longer to live. I'm 65 years old now, almost anyway. And, I'm only going to have probably 15 or 20 more years, right? And how many more of that am I going to be in good, long, distance adventure riding shape, right? So, again, for me, it's worth it, right, to eat good food and to stay in great places, see wonderful things, and not worry about pinching every dollar. But again, that's just me. You got to do you and be happy. All right, guys, ride safe. Keep squeezing your lemon.